Good evening, I'm Joel Flynn in Hong Kong. Welcome to the late edition of ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. The Hong Kong Professional Teachers Union has blasted the government for naming Christine Choi as the new Education Undersecretary after a list of new political appointees was unveiled today. Xi warns that China won't compromise on its sovereignty in a warning shot at home and abroad as the country celebrates 90 years of the PLA. And another shake-up in the White House as Anthony Scaramucci is fired from his post as communications chief just 10 days into the job. Good evening. The government has finally unveiled some of its picks of undersecretaries and political assistants today. Among the 10 undersecretaries announced, pro-Beijing educator Christine Choi will join the Education Bureau despite strong opposition by many in the sector. Liberal Party's Joseph Chan, also an investment banker, will help steer the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau. Two political assistants for former Chief Executive Su Wai-lung's administration, Caspar Cui and Bernard Chan, both from the pro-Beijing DAB party, have also been promoted as undersecretaries. Economic Development Minister Edward Yao said he's glad to see people from different walks of life joining the team.
I got a very good team of civil servants helping me, but I'm conscious that, well, my portfolio covers quite a wide spectrum of activities and economic activities in particular. So I hope with the different background, with the different expertise and with the diversity of experience, I hope it can sort of enrich our strength, and therefore we can take things forward in a more effective manner.
Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Professional Teachers Union has blasted Choi's appointment, saying the government has turned a blind eye to public opposition. They accuse Choi of placing her own political stance before professional judgment. Choi was previously the vice chairperson of the Hong Kong Federation of Education Workers, a pro-Beijing group which had championed for national education in schools 5 years ago. The group fear Choi may try to push through the controversial subject into the school curriculum.
We are afraid that if she is being appointed to that position, we will be confronting situation that our education will be over politicized, and there will be dogmatic propaganda rather than real education.
Well, to more on the cross-border rail link controversy, the pro-democracy camp has decided to boycott a scheduled visit tomorrow to the rail link's West Kowloon terminus and Shek Kon siding site. They say it's because the government has failed to clarify legal concerns about the highly controversial co-location immigration arrangement. The MTR Corporation last Friday invited all lawmakers to visit the sites. Chairman and CEO of the railway operator, Frederick Ma, and Lincoln Leung will attend the tour as well. This comes ahead of a LegCo meeting on Thursday when 3 top officials, including Justice Secretary Yirimsky Yuan, will discuss with lawmakers the contentious proposal. For more on the controversy, we spoke to Civic Party's Tanya Chan on their plan to skip the visit.
Without government officials simply visiting the construction site or station, well, it's not very constructive. Definitely, I believe that the government should accompany all the legislators and explain, or at least to answer the questions raised by the legislators during the visit.
Well, after leading Hong Kong's Catholic Church for 8 years, Cardinal John Tong is retiring. The Vatican has now named his second-in-command, Coadjutor Bishop Michael Yeung, as the new leader. 71-year-old Yeung was ordained in 1978. He was named coadjutor last year, which means co-assister in Latin, to help the bishop in administering the diocese. He came under fire earlier for comparing homosexuality with taking drugs, though he later said he was wrongly quoted. Human rights groups in Hong Kong are calling on the government to enact anti-human trafficking legislation, arguing that the city is lagging far behind in its efforts to combat the issue. Speaking to the press today, Civic Party lawmaker Dennis Kwok and leading human rights lawyer Patricia Ho presented a proposed draft bill on modern slavery. Kwok said if the government continued to turn a blind eye to the problem, he'll present it to LegCo in October to force the government to do something on the issue. An annual report on global human trafficking released by the US State Department has placed Hong Kong on its Tier 2 watch list for the last 2 years. That's just one rank away from the world's worst trafficking and forced labor offenders.
It is a huge crime that involves a very high human cost that we don't always see. And that is why that Hong Kong, being a first world city, has to do something to tackle human trafficking.
In words that will reverberate from Hong Kong to Washington, meanwhile, Xi Jinping has warned not only that China remains one indivisible country, but also that it will never compromise on defending itself. This comes as Beijing commemorated 90 years since the formation of the People's Liberation Army with a show of force few could hope to match. While the display of arms might be seen as intimidating by some, though, it was Xi's words that were designed to be feared the most. Grace Lee reports.
An iron fist in a velvet glove approach from China on Tuesday, President Xi Jinping sending a stern message to neighboring countries in the region.
China loves peace, but will never compromise on defending its sovereignty.
Those words coming as China marks 90 years since the founding of its armed forces. Xi stopped short of any direct reference to specific territorial disputes, but his point was clear. China will not be told what to do.
We will never allow any people, organization, or political party to split any part of Chinese territory away from the country at any time, in any form.
The world's largest military flexed its muscles over the weekend with a massive parade at a remote training base in Inner Mongolia. There, Xi told troops to transform themselves into an elite force, reminding them to always follow the Communist Party's orders. China has not fought a war in decades, and the government insists it has no hostile intent, but simply needs to properly defend the world's second largest economy. Still, there's no doubt that Beijing is rattling nerves across Asia. China is on a mission to revamp and modernize its forces, whilst militarizing man-made islands and making increasingly aggressive claims in the South and East China Seas. It also insists that Taiwan is a renegade province to be taken back by force if needed.
To the US now, and after just 10 days, Anthony Scaramucci is no longer the White House communications chief. According to the White House, President Donald Trump felt comments Scaramucci made in a magazine interview were inappropriate. Scaramucci was heavily criticized after he attacked then White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and Trump's chief strategist Steve Bannon in a profanity-laden terms last week. His firing comes just after new Chief of Staff John Kelly started his first day on the job.
The president certainly felt that Anthony's comments were inappropriate for a person in that position, and he didn't want to burden General Kelly also with that line of succession, as I think we've made clear a few times over the course of the last couple of days to several of you individually. But General Kelly has the full authority to operate within the White House, and all staff will report to him.
And that marks one major change put in place with Kelly in charge. All White House staff, from Trump's counselor Kellyanne Conway to even his daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner, now reports to the four-star Marine general. Kelly, who spent the last 6 months leading the Department of Homeland Security, is expected to bring a measure of discipline to an administration plagued by infighting. There are new reports stateside, meanwhile, that the president may have been behind a misleading statement made by his son about a meeting with Russia during the election. The Washington Post story surrounds Trump Jr.'s claims that his 2016 meeting with a Russian lawyer had nothing to do with his father's campaign. That later proved to be misleading. Now the Post claims his story changed because the president stepped in. An attorney for Trump has dismissed the Post's revelations. Elsewhere, the US has begun removing furniture and equipment from a diplomatic property in Moscow as it complies with a Kremlin order issued late last week. That order was a response to new sanctions on Russia approved by the US Congress, which are expected to be signed into law by the president soon. Removal men were seen dismantling play equipment and barbecues at a country villa just outside the Russian capital. The building is one of 2 diplomatic properties being seized by Moscow, while a number of US diplomatic staff in Russia are also being forced to leave their posts. OK, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. OK, let's start with the markets. Hong Kong shares are seemingly going from strength to strength, hitting a new 2-year high. The Hang Seng Index finishing up today 0.8%, pushed higher thanks to big gains in state-backed mainland firms, insurers Ping An and China Life, both rising more than 3.5%. We should also say it was a bumper day for internet giant Tencent, with its share price reaching a record high. Macau's casinos, meanwhile, are also on a hot streak, enjoying a 12th straight month of soaring revenue. VIP punters and tourists ready to spend are leading the recovery for the world's biggest gambling hub, which suffered a more than 2-year decline. Casinos raked in almost $3 billion from their tables last month, up 29%. Analysts were predicting growth of about 27 to 30%. Meanwhile, in China, data out earlier today is easing some worries about an economic slowdown. A survey of manufacturing bosses shows activity hit a 4-month high in July, largely thanks to strong export sales. The picture isn't as bright for workers, though, with factory employment falling at its highest rate in almost a year. Now, Snapchat's stock market woes appear to be going from bad to worse. Early investors have dumped shares en masse as a lock-up period ended, giving them a chance to offload their cut in the messaging app for the first time since it's floated. Conway R. Gittins has more.
Investors who haven't already been broken by a near 20% drop in shares of Snapchat parent Snap Inc. since its March IPO could be in for some